Radio Newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
A very good day to you with the news at this time. I am Tiana Jordan. To begin the news, here's a look at the leads. The People's National Congress reform leader and the vice president are at odds over whether there is a bloated voters list. A second senior official of the Ministry of Health has been stripped of her duties. In regional news, the British Virgin Islands and St. Kitts and Nevis have tried to reduce the cost of living. And the Bahamas government is trying to battle gang warfare. For the international news, we'll bring to you the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service. The details of these and other stories will be coming up in just a moment.
News Talk Radio Guyana is the station for you, bringing you news updates every hour, major news 3 times a day, edutainment on a higher level, shows like Beat the Clock, Brunch on the Coast, The Afternoon Jam, Youth's Perspective. It's a station that goes wherever you go, streaming online at www.bit.ly/newstalk1031. It's News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM.
And now the news in detail. President Irfan Ali is denying that the government's utterances about the flagging state of Trinidad and Tobago's oil and gas dependent economy amongst a subtle endorsement of that twin island nation's opposition United National Congress UNC. Vice President Bharat Jagdeo has created a firestorm in Trinidad and Tobago over his remarks that sister CARICOM nation's economy has been falling apart because of its over-reliance on oil and gas. While the UNC and Guyana's governing People's Progressive Party Civic, PPPC, have historically had close ties, President Ali says Mr. Jagdeo's views on Trinidad and Tobago do not amount to a pitch for that opposition party.
I have listened to the Vice President. He said nothing about opposition or government. Nothing about opposition or government.
The thought is
I'm dealing with straight language. Straight language. I am not interpreting language. Straight language. There was no pitch for any opposition or government. And listen, as I said, we in Guyana are focused on developing our country and working with every single one of our regional partners. We value every one of our regional partners, and we're going to work with every one of them.
In 2018, when current UNC leader Kamla Prasad Besesar had addressed an event that had been organized by the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association, no minister of the then David Granger-led administration had attended. However, former President Donald Ramotar and then opposition Chief Whip Gail Teixeira had been in attendance. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, has said that he had cautioned then-President David Granger about the long-term consequences of not giving up power. The electoral process, including several court cases and a recount, had lasted 5 months until the results had been declared in August 2020. The Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister was at the weekend reacting to opposition United National Congress UNC's parliamentarian Rodney Charles, who has been reportedly pushing the view that the Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister has close ties with Mr. Granger. Dr. Rowley, who had been part of a 5-member CARICOM prime ministerial team after the People's Progressive Party Civic had refused to accept 2 declarations, recalled telling then-President David Granger that he should accept the defeat gracefully.
There was one thing I said to my colleague at the time, who was the President of Guyana. I said, if you have lost this election, lose it with dignity. There'll be another chance. But if there's no dignity in this defeat, the next time you and your party will be of no use to your country. And that was the position of Trinidad and Tobago in Guyana.
Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley. Leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Aubrey Norton, and Vice President Bharat Jagdeo are at odds over whether a bloated voters list is being used to rig elections. Mr. Jagdeo says he has told United States Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Caribbean, Barbara Feinstein, that there are sufficient safeguards against voter fraud.
So not all the people on the voters list voted, and that you had a robust arrangement at the polling places, better than some developed countries in the world, to verify the people who voted, and that everyone, including APNU's agents, they all signed the statements of poll. So to claim today that they lost or somehow impute that they lost because of a bloated voters list is patently false.
At the last general and regional elections, for example, 460,352 ballots were cast, but the voters list contained the names of 661,378 eligible voters. But the PNCR leader, who also met with the senior U.S. government official for the Caribbean, told his party's general counsel that the governing People's Progressive Party has been using a bloated voters list in its strongholds to rig elections.
He fails to recognize that you cannot have free and fair elections if you don't have a clean voters list. He seems to be bargaining for a bloated list. What he didn't tell the international community is that in the communities where they exercise fear with a bloated list, the PPP can use it and do just like they did in the last election, rig. But the PPP has a special skill. They rig and then they accuse others of rigging. We say to them, a clean voters list is a must.
PNCR leader Aubrey Norton. A national vote recount shows that the results of the March 2020 elections had been much closer to the People's Progressive Party's statements of poll. The Ministry of Health has removed the Director of Mental Health, Dr. Util Richmond Thomas. Back in January, she had received notice of the termination of her contract with effect from the 23rd of March 2022. But on March 22nd, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Health, Malcolm Watkins, informed her that the termination of contract has been rescinded. However, she has been redesignated from the position of Director of Mental Health to a government medical officer, and that she will be the doctor in charge at the Enterprise Health Center, East Coast, Demerara. Dr. Richmond Thomas is the second known top official of the Ministry of Health whose duties have been taken away. The first was the Director of the Government Analyst Food and Drugs Department, Dr. Marlon Cole. He has been told to work closely with the Director of Standards and Technical Services to assist with capacity building, especially with particular focus on quality control. Dr. Richmond Thomas had served as Director of Mental Health in St. Lucia before returning home in 2017. And now for the regional news. Britain's Prince William has said he supports and respects any decision Caribbean countries make about their future, as Belize, the Bahamas, and Jamaica consider severing ties with the British monarchy. At the end of a tour with his wife Kate that was marked by protest against the legacy of the British Empire, William, the grandson of Queen Elizabeth, acknowledged that the relationship between the three Caribbean states and the Crown was changing. He says the British monarchy proudly supports and respects the decisions by Belize, the Bahamas, and Jamaica about their future. He added that relationships evolve and friendship last. His speech is the clearest indication that the royal family would support the three nations that are relinquishing the Queen as their head of state following the decision taken by Barbados last November. Usually, Buckingham Palace says such matters are up to the locals and politicians to decide. During her 70th anniversary on the throne, a milestone the tour was supposed to mark, Elizabeth has watched as former British colonies sever ties, but she remains Queen of 15 realms, including Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. However, the tour of William and Kate, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, has spotlighted waning support for the monarchy in the Caribbean. During the trip, there have been protests and calls for reparations from Britain and an apology for slavery. St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris says that his administration is currently exploring the possibility of wage and salary increases for workers in the Twin Island Federation. Speaking at the annual convention of the ruling People's Labour Party, PLP, on Saturday, Harris said that he has asked the Financial Secretary to consider the cost of granting the increase. According to the St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister, with uncertainty in the global environment, the prices of goods and services increase due to matters beyond the nation's control. The Prime Minister said these will include measures to reduce gas prices at the pump and will reduce certain taxes on certain items of groceries to make the cost of living more manageable for all. He reminded the nation that while things were tough due to the pandemic, his administration was able to deliver 3 stimulus packages while implementing income support. The British Virgin Islands government has announced that all custom duties that are above 5% are to be lowered to 5%. This will be effective from April 15, 2022 for 3 months in the first instance. Premier and Minister of Finance Andrew Foy has announced plans to have the Cabinet approve a fresh round of economic stimulus. In addition, Premier Foy stated that the government is also implementing measures to cushion the impact of rising fuel prices on residents. To this end, the Premier announced that the import duty on diesel will be reduced by 50% from 22 cents per imperial gallon to 11 cents per imperial gallon. He announced that the import duty on gasoline will also be reduced from 50% from 32 cents per imperial gallon to 16 cents per imperial gallon. Ten people, including young children, have been displaced by fire in Antigua. Antigua Newsroom reports that the fire at 2 adjacent homes in Sweets Village Saturday afternoon. No injuries have been reported, but the occupants say nothing has been salvaged. A wooden home was razed to the ground while an adjacent concrete structure was extensively damaged. Meanwhile, 2 abandoned houses were destroyed by fire and another that was occupied sustained damage Sunday afternoon at Point. And now for the international news, here's the latest bulletin from the BBC World Service.
BBC News, I'm John Shea. Attempts to get civilians out of areas of Ukraine that are under Russian bombardment have stalled, with the country's Deputy Prime Minister saying no humanitarian corridors would open today. Irina Vereshchuk said Russian forces could stage what she called provocations. Officials in the city of Mariupol are insisting that a complete evacuation is needed, as our correspondent Anna Foster in Lviv explains.
Well, the mayor of Mariupol probably puts it the best when he says that city is on the verge of a humanitarian catastrophe. There are still around 160,000 civilians who are trapped there. The city is entirely encircled by Russian forces. They have no electricity. He says they're running perilously low on vital things like food and water and medicine. So what he wants is for that city to be completely evacuated.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said it would be counterproductive for Presidents Putin and Zelensky to hold face-to-face talks at this juncture. Mr. Zelensky has been pushing for such a meeting. Lower-level talks are due to resume this week in Turkey. One of Russia's leading independent newspapers, Novaya Gazeta, says it's suspending its online and print operations until the end of Russia's military campaign in Ukraine. The publication said it followed a second warning from the country's media regulator. Here's our Europe regional editor, Danny Eberhard.
Novaya Gazeta forged its reputation as a rare independent voice in Russia's media landscape, frequently critical of the government. Its editor-in-chief, Dmitry Muratov, was jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize last year. It condemned what it called Putin's war at the outset, ignoring mandates to refer to the conflict as a special military operation. But a recent law threatening fines and long jail sentences for those who strayed from the official line put it and other non-state media organisations in a bind. Novaya Gazeta chose to continue operating, albeit in a heavily circumscribed way, but this proved unsustainable. It fears it might lose its licence altogether.
At a summit involving 4 Arab countries in Israel, the Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has said such deepening ties will intimidate and deter Iran. Foreign ministers from Egypt, the UAE, Morocco and Bahrain, as well as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, met in Israel's Negev desert, calling it a historic event. Morocco's Foreign Minister Nasser Bourita said his country wanted to see real peace in the region.
We are here today because we genuinely, sincerely and deeply believe in peace. Not that kind of passive peace, where we turn our backs to each other and peacefully ignore each other. But rather, we believe in a thorough, fruitful, paradigm-shaping and value-creating peace.
World News from the BBC. Millions of people in eastern Shanghai have spent their first day sealed at home, waiting to be tested as the authorities try to stamp out a worsening COVID outbreak. In the western half of China's richest city, people have stripped shops and markets of supplies as they prepare for their turn under lockdown later this week. Officials from Afghanistan's Public Morality Ministry have been patrolling entrances to government offices, checking that employees' beards and clothing conform to what they consider Islamic law. Lipika Pelham reports.
The Ministry for the Propagation of Virtue and Prevention of Vice warned that employees would risk losing their jobs if they failed to adhere to these rules and to pray 5 times a day. This is the latest of several new restrictions imposed by the Taliban in recent weeks, including the closure of secondary school for girls just hours after they reopened last week, triggering local and international outrage. Afghan women have also been banned from boarding domestic or international flights without a male chaperone. And on Sunday, all parks were ordered to be segregated by sex, which means married couples and families cannot visit together. The Taliban said they will respect everyone's rights in accordance with Islamic law and Afghan customs.
A court in Kenya has ordered the release of 16 motorcycle taxi drivers accused of sexually assaulting a female diplomat in the capital, Nairobi. The prosecution said it didn't have enough evidence to link the men to the crime. The alleged ringleader of the attack will stand trial. A new UN report has found that human rights violations in Libya, especially in places of detention, continue to be widespread. The report found many cases of enforced disappearance, torture and rape of detainees in facilities maintained by the authorities or by rival militias. And that's the latest BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.